future reference. Great, thank you very much, Tiffany. So just make sure you're all in the right place. This is Growing Avocados on the Central Coast by our UC Master Gardener program of Monterey and Santa Cruz County. And you're going to love this one. It's a great one. So as we've mentioned already, please keep your microphone and video off. It's easiest if you can use the speaker view because then you can see Loretta and not necessarily everybody else. Please use the chat window where it says chat at usually the bottom of the screen, but I'm sure you can find it. And if you have any questions, and we will address those at a breaking point or at the end of the program, but we will address them all. Oops, sorry. There is a closed caption button also that if you would like to have some hearing issues and would like to see this closed captioning, it's very helpful. For technical assistance, you can chat directly to me or to Tiffany, actually. It says Denise here, but there's Tiffany is our other Master Gardener working on this today. So either one of us can answer your questions. And after class, we will be sending this presentation and the link to the video. So you'll get both a PDF of slides and a video within about a week after the program. So that will be helpful. Okay, who are we? We are the UC Master Gardeners of Monterey and Santa Cruz County. We're part of the UC Cooperative Extension Program for the University of California. We also include residents of San Benito County because no other Master Gardener program picks them up. So we want to make sure we do. And our whole mission is to extend the research-based knowledge that comes out of the University of California and share it with the home gardeners, their pest management, their sustainable landscape practices, various information about horticulture. And we do base it as much as possible on that research that we have been informed about. So we try to make it something that we can show you what the research is or come close to it. We don't always know the answer, but we know how to get the answer is what we like to say. So if you stump us today on something, we can always get back to you with it. Okay, I am here going to turn it over to our wonderful instructor, Loretta, and you are going to enjoy this one. Go ahead, Loretta.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Hopefully this is fun and we all learn a lot. I like to learn from people asking me questions and who know more about me in certain areas. And I hope I can help you be a better avocado grower because they are tough. They're very sensitive and they're tough. So to get going once they're big, they're great. As long as you give them the water they want, but getting them to size is tough and getting them to bear can be tough too. So I retired from tech about 7-8 years ago and have bred some old rare breed pigs out on our place out here in Aromas. And it was during that time that we had all this land. So it's like, okay, I'm going to start planting some citrus and avocado trees, things like that, stone fruits, and rapidly encountered early death with a lot of the avocados I planted. So I learned the hard way. So hopefully you don't have to experience avocado tree death in order to get your avocados to bearing age. Next. Here's what we'll cover today. We'll talk about the varieties of avocados that grow well. And in particular, I'm talking about our cool, foggy summers. Avocados naturally want warm summers. And because we're cool and foggy and our rainy, wet springs, lots of varieties can be difficult to get to bear here. But that's why we'll talk about the varieties, the proven varieties that grow well here and are easy to find in nurseries and online and things like that. So you also learn how to care for them, watering and fertilizing, when to pick the fruit, which is a big question that comes up a lot, pests and diseases, and where to get further help. Next. So here's some of the basics about avocados. Like many other fruit-bearing trees, they come in two parts. You have the top scion, the grafted variety, the good variety of avocado that's grafted onto a rootstock. So it's in two pieces, and that rootstock is chosen for lots of different reasons. It could be disease resistance, cold hardiness, salinity, water salinity. There's all kinds of reasons to choose a rootstock, but when you buy a tree in the nursery, it's going to be on a certain rootstock, and the majority of them are that I see are seedling. You can get some that are clonal rootstocks, but basically it's important to know that it's in two parts. And that seedling rootstock, if it takes over your tree, it isn't going to give you the avocado you bought, if it gives you anything at all, just so you know. Next. So avocado trees originated in the tropical areas of South Central Mexico and South America. So there's really old records of human consumption. But basically it's that Mexican state of Puebla is their ideal climate where they evolved. And so that's why there's some complicated aspects to the bloom times and stuff of avocados that are due to the fact of where they evolved. And we pulled them a lot further north than that to get good crops. So in the US, the commercial growing areas are in Southern and Central California. 90% of the US grown avocados come from there, and the remainders are grown in Florida and some in Hawaii. So even though we have this cool, foggy summer, there are varieties that are successful here. So that's what we'll talk about today. Next. Where are you going to plant them? Choose your site, get the warmest, sunniest location you've got that at least gets 6 hours of mostly full sun. It doesn't have to be hot and really direct all the time, because actually, avocados, they evolved kind of as an understory tree. So they can take a decent amount of shading from other bigger trees, but you do want to have a good 6 hours of mostly full. It can be a little filtered, and avoid those low spots on your place where the cold air collects, because avocados don't like frost, the majority of them. So we want to keep them out of frosty, cold, low spots and windy areas as well. If you're getting a salty coastal wind, that could be very detrimental if we don't have a good block, those salty ocean winds. So watch out for the areas like that. And you got to consider the height and width. These are going to be 30 to 50 feet tall and wide. Plant carefully, but they can be easily cut to size. And there are varieties that are naturally, I'm not going to say dwarf, but they're naturally smaller growing than other varieties. So we can talk about those. And so I've seen some pruned to where they're kept 8 to 10 feet apart, and each tree is kept in its own little size. So you can prune them smaller and still get good fruit. Next. You can grow them in a wide range of soils, but well draining is essential. Heavy clay soils, you can have problems. If you have heavy clay where you dig that hole and you fill it with water and it doesn't drain in an hour, you're going to want to plant that tree on a mound. But you can do it. These slopes of these rocky, granity soils in Southern California and the San Diego area and Vista, where you have a lot of commercial groves, that's where they grow, on slopes in what you would think is poor, gritty soil, but they love it. So good, well-drained, gritty soil is the best, but they adapt. Okay, so here's a few pictures of some babies. Just when you select a tree, first go with a variety that is suitable for your climate and your yard space. And then just look for a tree with dark green leaves and a smooth trunk. Avoid ones that you see little shadings of dark on the limbs or the trunk. Could be they're already kind of sunburnt. So watch out for that. And of course, nothing with pest damage. There's some little leaf cutter bees and certain snails and things that like to eat holes in leaves, but best to start with the best tree you can find. Next. So here's some varieties, and these aren't by any means the only ones that will grow here, but they're ones that are common to what you'll find in nurseries and online. So there's more that people are finding grow well here, and we can add on to that as they become more commercially available. But here's the list. And what I included, because some people have this in their head, is, okay, I want to know if it's an A or a B. It just has to, it describes the way they bloom. And some temperature, this chart has kind of a temperature sensitivity threshold. Flavor, which is of course subjective, but this is general, the flavors that most people agree on. The tree size, so you can see which ones are smaller, like the Gem and the Gwen. And Reed, it says medium, but it's actually very narrow. And you can top it to keep it small because it grows narrow and tall, but you don't have to let it grow that tall. So anyway, and approximate ripening time. And I've kind of added onto this. When you buy an avocado tree in the nursery, it may have on its tag when it ripens, but that tag is normally geared for a Southern California grown avocado, not a Northern one. We are later by 2 to 3 months in general from what you'll typically see on a tree tag. So that's what I try to adjust for in this chart as well. So just keep that in mind. And if you're saying, oh, my avocados aren't ripe yet, what's wrong? And it could just be because we're in Northern California. Everything starts a little later and warms up later here. And that's true of the avocado bloom period and ripening. Next. Okay, so if you're going to plant your tree in the ground, again, select your site with some good direct sun, away from winds, southern exposure if you have it, not necessarily vital, but that's the best spot you can find. And when you dig that hole, don't dig a really deep hole and backfill with organics and things like that. Dig the hole as deep as the pot it came in. Don't dig it any deeper. And I'll tell you why. You can dig it wider, rough up the sides of the hole. Use a gopher basket. If you know you have gophers, protect that young tree with a basket so it has a chance. And just be gentle. The roots are sensitive. So I want you to turn that pot sideways, loosen a little bit and gently slide it out, supporting the root ball, and then plant it. And the reason you don't want to go deeper is what I had happen to a lot of my trees at first is we used an auger to dig a nice deep hole and I backfilled. Well, they sink because it's so fluffy. And you get the crown, that root crown of the tree gets buried. That's not a good thing for most fruit trees. You don't want to bury that root crown. It makes it prone to disease. So that's why you don't want to dig that hole deep, but you can go wider. And if you have that harder soil, rough it up. Don't leave a nice smooth hole. Kind of make it rough and backfill with the same soil you dug out. The experts are all agreeing that with fruit trees, and that includes avocados and citrus, it's better if you don't augment the soil too much. If you have a really horrendous soil, maybe go no more than 20% of an organic material. But in general, avocados, if you put a lot of mulch or organics in around the roots and planting, that stuff breaks down and rots, and that invites avocado root rot, which is very sensitive too. So it's better if this is backfilled with something gritty, your own natural soil, and or gritty decomposed granite, sand, perlite, pumice, likes gritty mediums to grow in. Next. So these pictures show a little berm around the tank when you first plant that tree. So typically when you buy a young tree, it has a lot of roots in a little area, in a little pot or a little sleeve. So when it's first planted, what this little berm around the tree helps you do, one, it makes it easy to fill. You just fill it with water and it directs the water toward the roots, where the roots are. So this is good for anything, any fruit tree you're planting, especially if it's a little root bound. You want to get the water at first until those roots venture out into your soil. You want to get the water directed to where the roots are. So that's all the berm does for you. If you have a drip system, you can do it that way too with a real slow drip. So at the close by the trunk at the root level, and then slowly move those out as your tree grows and the roots dig in around it. The other thing that's beneficial when you plant to avoid some of the common problems with avocado, which is root rot, is some gypsum It's a soil additive, and you could put 10 pounds of gypsum around that tree. And it kind of protects against fungal rots and helps break up clay soils. That's what gypsum does. Our areas out here, we do have the different fungal diseases in our soil, especially if it was wooded and oaks before. We have Phytophthora, among other fungal diseases. So it can help with that if you add the gypsum. And then the other thing that avocados like is a few inches of a wood chip mulch to conserve moisture and cover the exposed root ball, because you want it likes to have its roots grow on the top foot of soil, basically, even once it's established. So you want to help keep those roots cooler and a little moist. So that's what the wood chip just on top after you plant does for your planting. Then water well and add a stake. I see a lot of these trees with a stake right on the stem. You get them that way. It's right on the trunk of the tree. Cut it off and move it out a little bit. Tie the tree to that and let it move. You don't want to truss up a young little tree so tight to the trunk that it can't move, because when you cut that tree away, the stake away, the tree has rooted, and then you see it just fall over because the trunk is weak. Just like our legs, if it doesn't get any exercise, it's going to be weak and have no muscle. So when you allow a little room for movement, when you tie an avocado to a stake, and if the tree is big enough, you might want to do 2 stakes, one on either side, but let it have an inch or 2 of sway room so it builds up strength as it stays straight. Okay, next. So here's something to do if you have really super heavy clay soil. You can plant on a mound. It's a lot more work, but you'll have better success if you fear that your soil is just too heavy to drain well. So you elevate, dig a little in, mix a little of that clay in, but you're planting in gritty, will draining soil. And if you use a bagged mix, you can get a cactus blend that have a lot of pumice and sand in them. Or you can make your own, what I call a gritty mix, and the recipe for that comes up later in the presentation. And you can make a form out of wood or wire. Some people do that because they like a real defined shape around their tree. Just make it at least 3 to 5 foot wide, depending on the size of your baby tree, and 1 to 2 foot high. Usually works for a small tree, in a sleeve or one that you bought in a 3 to 5 gallon pot. So you can do that. And you can see that one in the picture. They've mounded it with a lot of the gritty stuff, and then they've covered that mound with leaves and or wood chips, because avocados like mulch. They don't like it mixed up into their soil, but they like it on top where it can just break down at its own rate and help feed the soil and the tree. Next. So mounds are harder to water. So hopefully you have some little micro sprinklers or drips that you put multiples of around the tree. I buy that drip line that has built-in emitters. I think it's a 1/4 inch. They have the emitters every 6 to 9 inches or even a foot. And I just spiral it around the tree so you can get an even drip. And then I just relax that spiral as the tree grows. So you can do something like that, or use what you've got. If you have emitters, just start them close to the tree and move them out as the tree grows. And those mounds will dry out faster, of course, than an in-ground tree. So you'll need more frequent watering. And avocados need more water than other fruit trees. So just know that and be careful with your watering. Next. So if you're planting in a pot, some people want to plant a pot because they just don't have the space or whatever. So of course it's going to be a big tree. So 5 to 40 gallon range should suffice for a while. The size you choose depends on the size of the root ball that you're planting. And again, because they're very susceptible to root rot, don't use a nice organic blend soil that has compost in it. You want to avoid anything that's already rotting. So you get that gritty soil mix formulated for cactus or citrus, or mix your own. And don't get anything that has moisture granules or organic compounds. A lot of the the Miracle Grows have the moisture granules, so you don't have to water as often, but that's not what you want with an avocado. You don't want things staying moist under there because it just invites rot. So again, be gentle when you cut away the pot or sleeve and gently set the tree in the new pot. With that root ball a little elevated, so you have room to put mulch. Even in your pots, you want to give yourself a little room to put some wood mulch and some gypsum, and or if it's not a wood mulch, I've seen coarse soil amenders that are like a coarse, it's finer than a wood mulch, but it's not as fine as a compost. So that would work too. Something coarse and kind of woody would work. Next. Here's this copycat, and this is a good mix for a lot of things. You can plant anything in it. You just have to water more because it is well draining. And it has, and you might be amazed to see, well, it has peat or coconut coir. And that's because they don't break down like a fine wood-based compost or wood-based mulch that you see a lot of in stores. So this mix has sphagnum or coconut, and you can see it has a lot of washed coarse builder sand that you would get at a big box store, or you can get decomposed granite from a landscape supply. Just don't use what they call playground sand, which is a real fine silica, or beach sand, of course, it's the salts and stuff in it, and it's fine. And 2 parts pumice, 1 part perlite. If you can't find pumice or it's kind of costly, just substitute the perlite for that. And if you can find it, a little horticulture charcoal is good for everything you pot up. Next. Watering your trees. So the avocado trees, they love cool, moist, airy roots. And you say, well, how can it be moist and airy? Well, that's what all the sand and the gritty stuff does, is it provides air down there. And there is some moisture retention from the coir and the peat. So it's both, it's airy and moist. That's what they love. So this schedule came from a Southern California avocado expert, and you can adjust yours to your yard, your microclimate. But in the peak of summer, if we're getting hot days, and for us, 80 in the 80s is hot for us, isn't it? So you might want to water every week or even twice a week, depending on how shallow your tree is, how newly planted it is. Just know that they don't want to get too dry, especially when it's hot. And of course, if your tree's in a pot or on a mound, it's going to require more frequent watering. So stick your finger under there and probe a couple inches down to get to where the roots are, and then you'll know how frequently you have to water. It's hard for anybody to say. Somebody asks me all the time, how often should I water? And it's like, well, you have to determine that based on your location and your soil type. And the best way to do that is you stick your fingers in there and feel for moisture, how long it lasts, and just know that when it's cooler and in our misty parts of the summer, it's going to stay moist under there longer. But when we get those drier, hotter months, spring and fall typically is hotter than our summer, right? So you might have to up your watering those days. So just know that can happen, and you'll become one with your trees eventually, understanding based on your climate and the weather if they need water or not. Next. Here's some fertilizers that are common, and mostly I listed organic ones. It doesn't have to be organic, but typically ones formulated for citrus and avocado have what or they're formulated for citrus. Usually they also have the word avocado, but they're very similar in what they like. They have some sulfur to give you a little acidity. They have calcium and they have iron, in addition to your typical major fertilizer components. In the references later in the presentation, I have listed places here in Watsonville where you can get some really good prices on organic fertilizers for pretty cheap. If you have a lot of trees you're fertilizing, you can save a lot of money by getting them from the wholesalers. You can see that later. Next. Here's some more. I really like the down-to-earth stuff because you can even compost the box. And one thing too, if you're going to plant in pots, I always add a little bit of my own native soil, because what you're doing is you're inoculating that store-bought potting mix with some mycorrhizae that are already in your soil. They're there. So I have pictures of it here, and a lot of the organic fertilizers now are coming with the microbes in it that will help. These microbes help the tree assimilate the fertilizers. It helps them uptake nutrients. There's all kinds of benefits to the microbes. So it's important to have a little inoculant of some sort in your soil, your pot, whatever. So you can add it, or if you're planting in the ground, chances are your ground already has them. So you don't need to inoculate, but they're listed here in case you're growing in a pot. I put a little bit in. Next. Okay, here's the biggest problem with young avocado trees is protecting from sun and heat. You might think, well, we're foggy and it doesn't get that hot, but we get sun, and our trees, I can attest by personal death experiences that they get sunburnt out here, because you buy this young little tree and it just is mostly trunk and not a lot of leaves, and it will get sunburnt. It's been grown in a greenhouse or a shaded hoop house, so it hasn't had to contend with the real sun that you planted in when you get your tree. So you've got to shade it. And you can do that in multiple ways, because think of it as little baby skin. You wouldn't just put your infant out in the sun. You've got to sunscreen it. So you can paint the trunk and the branches with a 50-50 blend of whitewash that's like a flat latex acrylic paint, interior, cheap ceiling paint, whatever. You mix it half 50-50 with water, and just paint it on the trunk and the branches, everything that's exposed to the sun. The leaves, leave them alone. Or you can get this other stuff. It's not cheap. You can go in with somebody to buy it, because usually you have to buy it in kind of big amounts. So if you go in with somebody, it comes out a better deal. But that Surround WP, it's basically white kaolin clay, powdered clay. You mix it with water and spray it on, and it's like a mineral sunscreen, just like when you get a sunscreen that kind of turns your skin white because it has titanium or zinc in it, whatever it has. That's what this kaolin does for the tree. And folks have good results with that. And just know that if it rains, because it's not as water insoluble as the paint is, when it rains, it'll wash it off and you may have to reapply. The other thing that people do, I've seen pictures that posted, they put umbrellas, which would shade it from the hottest part of the day, that overhead direct time. And then maybe when the sun, changes angles, it's not so tough on the tree. But I've seen umbrellas. And then of course that white fabric you see in the picture that's called Agrabah or Rime, it will shade a certain percentages of sun. So you might want to do that if you already have it. But basically, I whitewash the stems and the trunk and branches. It just lasts longer. Then I don't have to worry about a cloth blowing off. Okay, the next thing you want to protect from is from the cold or the frost. So most avocado trees, not all, there's some tougher varieties out there, but most of the best tasting ones will get damaged at 32 degrees, especially when they're young little babies. When they get bigger, there's more leaf mass and it insulates itself. And then maybe you just get frost damage on the outer canopy of your tree. But when it's young and it's a baby, you have to protect it from frost. So again, you could use these frost blankets, and it's kind of a Rime that's thicker than the one that you see for shade. But you can see them in nurseries. They sell it by the roll typically, or you may be able to find it by the yard already cut and folded in packets, but it's called frost blanket. So it's thicker. Some people that may get that occasional big frost, they use the C9, I believe they're called, the old-fashioned Christmas lights that actually generate heat. They have a big bulb in them. Modern Christmas lights are typically LED. So those wouldn't benefit you at all because they don't generate any heat. So they're not going to help keep your tree warmer. But if you're going to get that deep frost and you want to protect that investment that you have in that tree, put some Christmas lights on it, or a couple layers of a frost blanket that you can take off the next day once the danger is over. And you may get just a couple degrees of protection from the frost cloth, but that might be all you need, depending on the type of cold you're getting. And if you're getting an extreme amount of cold, hopefully it's, well, choose your tree based on what your typical lows are, and even look at your, maybe over the last 10 years, what your historical lows were, because that can happen again. Even though we're warming up, you can still get a good historical low that'll, I had that happen here. And right, my first whole crop and all these trees, all the avocados turned black and fell off because we got a deep cold here in Aromas. That it was successive days of 28 degrees. And it wasn't just one day, it was like 3 or 4 in a row. Couldn't tell you how long ago that was, but I was just heartbroken. My first crop all just turned black and fell off. So I was ready to give up on avocados, but stick it out and protect them. That's the lesson I can tell you to do. Next. Pruning. Avocado trees are different from other stone fruits and roses and stuff with pruning, because basically when they're young, you don't really need to prune all that much unless you have a real wayward branch that's throwing your whole balance off your little tree, then you can prune it. But avoid pruning young, because you want all those leaves to grow and help protect your tree, because that's what they do. And if you are going to prune late winter through early spring, January and February is your best time to do that, after your last chance of frost. Because if it's still a good chance of frost, you want to wait till that happens, and then you could use your pruning to cut off everything that turns black. You prune too soon, you cut off protection, that frost hits, and you have to cut it away again because you had some death hitting that tender inner growth. So wait until after your frost risk is gone before you prune. And the other thing to know is that when you prune, you see on that picture there, there aren't joints on an avocado branch that you prune to, because that's where the branches are going to branch off of, like apples and stone fruits. They sprout from anywhere. When you prune, anywhere along that branch that you pruned can sprout up. It'll get stimulated. Yes, a lot of it'll happen maybe at the ends where you pruned, but it'll happen all along that branch and you won't know where. So you could get upright growth that you might want to cut off that are like little sucker shoots. Or if you need that growth, just maybe keep it in check and shorten it and leave it there. I tend to do that when it's a young tree. I don't prune suckers vertical growth off. I leave the growth there for a while. The other thing that's very, very important to prune off is when you get suckers coming up from the ground, cut those off. Their rootstock, it's vigorous, and it's more vigorous than what was grafted on your tree. And if you don't watch it, it will take over your tree. Your fruit-bearing part will kind of falter and won't grow very much because all the energy is going to that rootstock. And it will take over, and you'll think your tree is doing great and it has all this new growth, but it's not what you want to grow. So keep the suckers in check that come up from the roots or even below that graft. When you get your young tree, look for the little scar a couple inches up from the soil line. That is your graft union. You'll see a scar, and anything growing up from the trunk under that scar, just rub it off when it's little. Don't let it get big because it will take over your tree. Had it happen. So that's the things to watch out for. And also there's pictures there showing, shapes of trees. Certain varieties of trees have a certain growth pattern in general. Some are very upright and narrow, like reed. Some are wide and short, like Pinkerton. But a lot of the other trees just grow tall and wide. So when you prune, just be careful that, because you may be pruning and introducing a big bare branch because of what you cut off. And just know that if you don't protect that big bare branch, it's going to get sunburnt because you just gave it a haircut and now its neck's going to get all red. So watch out for things like that. Next. Here's a picture I was telling you about, the rootstock. Oh, pruning. This is another pruning your tree. So, oval shapes or pyramids will let more sun into the canopy if you want to give it a shape like that. And it's just showing examples of where, if you prune a lateral branch, it can sprout anywhere on that shoot that you prune. This almost looks like, this here looks like the lower one is like a vertical shoot that it cut to send off side branches, which is what you can do. And then again, if it's extensive pruning, just coat the exposed limbs and trunks with your whitewash so you don't get sunburn. Next. Here's what happens when that rootstock takes over. The top photo, there's the graft scar, and that little red shoot is coming from below the graft because it isn't like the new growth above. It's redder and it's different. So yeah, you'd want to rub that off right away because it will take over. The bottom picture, you can see that this is what fools people. And they say, oh, I finally got new growth and it's dark green, and maybe the rest of the leaves are going to green up. That part of the tree that's dark green is going down. It's coming up from the base of the tree, either under the root, under the graft scar, or from the roots. So be careful about that and get them off when they're young if you see them, because you want the nutrients to go to your fruit bearing tree. You can, some people, and if it does take over, you can say, well, I'll just let it grow and see what kind of fruit I get. Maybe you'll get something good, maybe not. It takes longer for what I'm calling a seedling, because that typically is what avocado trees are grafted to. When you get them from the nursery, it was a seedling, either a Zutano or a Duke or a big seed that gives a healthy little sapling to graft onto. So you're taking your chances that it will be a good avocado. Typically, they'll be not that great. I have 24 huge seedling trees that I want to, once I learn how to do it, cut back to the nubs, because avocados can handle that. You can cut up the trunk back to just a few feet up off the ground, or cut off big branches, and the new sprouts that pop up, I will graft onto them. So that's how old avocado orchards are rejuvenated. They basically cut them down to just a few feet off the ground and then graft onto the vigorous growth that comes up, that the tree shoots off of that pruned trunk. Next. Commonly asked question, you'll see information in the nurseries, and most people think here, we gotta have an A and I gotta have a B variety of avocado, or else I won't get fruit. And that maybe is only true in the regions of Puebla where the avocado evolved. So this A and B, every tree, the flowering pattern is studied. And just to be simple about it, an A variety of avocado, like some of the good ones, Hass, Lamb, Gwen, Gem, the flower, when it opens female in the morning. Typically it'll open as a female and then close. I forget, does it close that afternoon or the next day? Anyway, that blossom closes, and then when it opens again, the same flower, it's male. Okay, and you can tell by looking at them which it is. And then the other variety, the B, it's reverse. It opens male in the afternoon, closes, and then the next morning opens female. So you figure, well, if that happens on one tree, then yeah, they're not open at the same time, so it's not going to pollinate. And I need to have the bee, which is the opposite timing, to pollinate. But in our weather, in our climate, and even in Southern California, that whole pattern is muddled and there's a lot of overlap. So the good varieties of trees, of fruit, will self-pollinate because of the overlap in the female and males being open at the same time. So just know that you don't have to have an A and B, and the A's are going to be better for us in our climate. You're going to get a better avocado if you get an A. So even if you have room for two, I'd say 2 good A's that have a different ripening time will be better than an A and a B, because most of the B's, they aren't the greatest in our climate. Okay. So you're wasting space on something that is kind of bleh. It's it's edible. I make guacamole out of mine, but you have to add a lot of stuff to make a bland avocado taste good. And it's still bland, if that makes any sense. So good A's are better than making room for a B in general. There's a few exceptions, but okay, why doesn't my tree bear fruit? So problems with pollination. Our springs, when your trees are opening, I've had some blooming now for over a month. So they did start opening some of them when it was wet and cold, and the pollinators don't want to come out. The main pollinator isn't your typical honeybee for an avocado. I do see some on certain varieties, but in general, avocado pollen is kind of bitter and tacky, and the bees don't prefer it. They'll eat it if that's all they have. But what else is blooming at the time your avocados are is citrus. So they're going to be over there scarfing up the citrus and getting pollen from nectar from there and leaving your avocados alone. So when you look at your avocado blooms, here's the kind of pollinators you see that you appreciate. You see ants. Sometimes they're winged ants. You see these little, they look like flies, little house flies, but they're syrphid flies and other flies that like that pollen. So you want to encourage all the pollinators you can. So here's some pictures of what you might see on your open blossoms, and don't think they're a bug you need to spray for. Leave them. They will help with pollination. There's been a little bit of success. I don't know that a true scientific experiment has been done, but folks say if you spray the open blossoms with a 1 to 4 honey to water solution, you will attract honeybees because of the honey water. I haven't tried it, but an expert in Orange County has tried it, and he said he sprayed one branch out of a tree just to prove it, and that's the branch that bore a lot of avocados. So that might be proof enough. If you can attract the bees, maybe you'll get more pollination. The other thing about pollination, it isn't just one little grain of pollen in that female that will pollinate it. Avocados need multiple grains of pollen to pollinate that ovule in order to grow a fruit. It's something like from 7 to 10 grains, something like that. So besides it being not that great and being tough weather, it's also just a difficult because it needs so many little pollen grains. So if your tree's not blooming, then you want to look at the variety. If it's getting sun, is it getting enough water, little fertilizer. I don't fertilize mine a whole lot. Some directions, especially on the fertilizer bag, okay, they tell you to fertilize every month or every, a good spring fertilization, and then maybe in the fall is all I would do instead of doing it every 2 months like fertilizer bags say, because they want to sell you lots of fertilizer. And it's enough that I've seen just to do it maybe a couple times a year. But that's up to you and what you feel your tree needs in your soil. Next. Another big question, when are they ready to pick? Right now, I still have varieties in bloom. The later varieties are blooming, but they're carrying fruit from last year. And a lot of newbies to avocados will think I have to pick those because they're late and I'm blooming and it's going to be hard on the tree. But your best avocados, so you know, they hang on the tree 16, 18 months. Hass, Carmen's, Gems, all the good A's, they hang on longer than one bloom cycle. And you see that with oranges too. But anyway, so just know that it's definitely a norm to see avocados still hanging on your tree and the new blossoms are coming out. And that might be part of the reason why a lot of avocados alternate bear. If you've heard of that term, Hass is notorious for it. It'll have a big crop and the next year hardly any. And then the next year a big crop and the next year hardly any. And it might be because, you know, at bloom time, it still has a big crop on it, or and that might be just the tree knows it's still using a lot of energy to ripen and grow this fruit. So it's not going to set a lot for you that next season. And then there are varieties that they're breeding, that they're coming out with now, that are less prone to alternate bearing, and they still taste as good as a Hass. That's the Hass is the golden standard of excellence in flavor of an avocado here. And so everybody wants the flavor of the Hass that doesn't alternate bear, that can take more cold. And that's what they're always breeding for. So just know that it can hang on the tree a long time. So when is it ready? Watch your fruit. They start out, they're really glossy, and you'll see them in like on the section picture. The first picture is real glossy and the second one is dull. You'll see a dullness in the skin, and you'll also see a yellowing of that stem. It'll start getting yellow. And that is maybe time to test one. Don't pick your whole crop, just test one. And if it ripens for you, just keep pinching it, because it's going to be hard as a rock. And then if it ripens up in 2 weeks, I've had some even good that took 3 weeks to get soft enough to eat, and it was still good. So when you pick it and it ripens and tastes good, mark the date you picked it, because you're going to set records for yourself based on the variety when it was first edible. And then if you have enough, just try one a month, or if you only have 3, then let it go 2 or 3 months before you pick another one. And test that one, and they will get better, because the longer they hang, they get more oil content in the fruit. So they get better. And then the ones at the very end, maybe it's that stem is looking beyond yellow, it's starting to get a little brown. Maybe that was a little too long, or the fruit starts getting a rotten spot on it. That hung a little too long, but pick it anyway and eat it. But then at least you know for your tree and your location what your range of picking is. So that's good to know. Let's see what else. Yeah, and then some varieties like a lamb Hass is one. It's really precocious. I love the lamb. It started bearing young for me, and it actually starts turning black before it's ready to pick. So a Hass doesn't necessarily, a lot of the varieties are still green in color, but dull, and the stem yellows, and then they're pickable, but the Hass starts turning black. So if it's a visual indicator like that, that's an easy one. But not all the varieties are like that. So you have to look for other signs. Next. This is what I just described about how to kind of determine your range for your tree and your climate when it's edible, and when the best flavor is, and when the earliest flavor is. So, you know, with our cooler climate, we have an extended harvest. Like that one, the Hass tree that I heard about, and I verified it with my Hass, it still, when it was first edible, that last Hass was 10 months later. So you can almost, if you had a big tree and with a lot of fruit, you can almost year round, but it's 10 months, at least on that one. And that's because I'm kind of cool here. The other thing I did, because squirrels were and rats were loving my fruit, especially in the latter months of its ripening time, I covered them with foil, and just to maybe freak out the rats. And it worked, nothing ate them. And I think that foil also kept sun off the fruit and maybe helped it hang longer. The fruit, when I took the foil off, was kind of red in color, but it still tasted great. So that's one thing that may come up, is how to protect your fruit from everything else that's going to want to eat it. People put mesh bags, they put plastic clamshells from produce and strawberries, they clamp it onto the stem to keep out rats and squirrels. I found the foil to be very effective myself, and it just conforms, and that's what I use. And but again, I can still reach my fruit on the smaller trees. Okay, and another commonly asked question is, when will my seedling bear? We save seeds. There's a lot of them sentimental value. Someone gave you a tree that they grew, and it was from a seedling, a pit. So just know that it can take 5 to 10 years for that seedling to fruit, which is significantly longer than a grafted tree. And you don't know what you're going to get. It could be something really good. In general, it's not as good as the parent, the Hass or the Fuerte or whatever you bought that you planted the pit from. because it takes a lot of seedlings to get you something that's as good or better. But they're out there, and that's part of the fun of what people, you know, the avaholics that are out there in the world, they're especially in Northern California, they're always looking at these old seedling planted trees and studying, and can I taste? And they're going and they're getting budwood and they're grafting to see how it does in other parts of the state. And that's one of the other fun things that once you get into avocados, you start obsessing, and there's this new tree that was a seedling, and it could take frost and it can handle more cold and it's good. Things like that, you'll get excited. But so by no means is a seedling inferior. It's a fun experiment, and you may get something good, and it may have sentimental value because of where that pit came from and who grew it and gave it to you. But in general, and if you're gonna, what a lot of people do with their seedlings is then they start grafting. Now is the time. People are out there for the last few months. Folks have been sharing budwood from their known good fruit-bearing trees, and it's not hard to graft. But you do have to be careful in the selection of where you graft to. I've tried grafting. I have one that took, but the tree it prefers to give its energy to the existing branches and the existing trees than something you've just grafted on. So you may have to kind of isolate that branch by cutting off a lot of growth to where you're going to graft, to make sure your tree gives that graft enough nutrients it needs to break its dormancy and grow. So it's not hard. People who graft stone fruits and apples, they're typically easier. But avocados, once you learn it, you can get better at it. And it's a great thing to graft onto some seedlings that you've grown, because you don't have to experiment on a tree that you paid a lot of money for. So this is commonly asked. You see that tree there? A lot of trees in the last few months, a lot of avocado trees have looked like that. And people think it's nutrient deficiency. In rare cases it is, but in this case, this is what avocados do typically at their bloom time, is they drop a lot of leaves. Some may defoliate a lot and some just a little, but don't panic. Don't start overdosing your avocado on plant food. This is natural for this time of the year, for the leaves to get veiny or brown tipped and fall off, and leave them mulch to mulch the root zone of your tree, because they love their own leaves as mulch. So leave it there. Don't rake it up. Some people have beautiful, clean soil underneath their trees because they're just that way with all their trees, and they're neatniks, and they don't want something looking messy and leafy. But if you want good avocados, let it be mulchy. Let it be leafy with its own leaves and mulches. It'll be happier. So that's the end of the majority of the demo, the presentation. I have a lot of other slides on diseases and pictures on sources for where to buy avocado trees online, local sources. But here we're talking about some other stuff coming up for master gardeners. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions.
Okay. Do you want to do your other portion first?
Okay.
Loretta?
All right. So where to buy? We have this epicenter, this first one, Epicenter Avocados, is local here in La Selva Beach. So they're even more coastal than I am. And they, every spring, I think they open up their website the first of the year, and you can order. And then hopefully you get the varieties you want, but they have good descriptions of their varieties. They do a lot of, they're finders, they're foragers. So they've got a lot of varieties that you won't see in a nursery that grow well here, that were seedlings and found, and they go out and they taste it, and then they get budwood, and then they graft it and see how it does here. And then if it does well and tastes good, they sell it. So you can read a lot of good information on rare varieties, different varieties at Epicenter Avocados. So they have good descriptions. There's also good articles there. There's a video on growing avocados, and that explains this whole A and B thing and varieties. And then there's he did another article, it's older now, but based on when they got some deep frost, which trees did better in his yard, because he has different microclimates anyway. But they're a really good resource. And if you get the chance, I would go and read up on a lot of the stuff that's on that epicenter. Another good source for trees is Four Winds Growers. They're local here in Watsonville. They grow their citrus in greenhouses there, but they also get avocados. I'm not sure if they graft their own avocados, but they sell all kinds of stone fruits. Right now, they have typically really good selections of stone fruits, figs, olives, and avocados as well. So you could check them out. If you want to get better, I don't know if it's better, commercial rootstock trees, Brokaw Nursery sells to commercial orchards, and they have a lot of what are called clonal rootstocks. It isn't a seedling. It's a clone of a proven variety that has superior rootstock characteristics, maybe better yield, tree longevity, salinity. They sell different rootstocks, but they're clones. So it's a complex process, but basically they graft their clonal rootstock onto a seed. And once that's growing, then they put this little contraption around that joint that holds in moisture and moss or whatever, and they get that clone, that graft that they put, to root. Then they cut off the nurse seedling that nursed it for a while, and then they graft onto the clonal rootstock. They graft the fruit-bearing kind. So there's some interesting things that they have. They sell seedling trees too, but you can look at Brokaw and read up on their clonal rootstock. And if you want their trees, you can go in with somebody because it's a minimum buy. One time I wrote this, it was 20 trees. So you can go in with other folks. I see it done. They get together on different social media sites and say, hey, I want to buy from Brokaw, who wants to go in, and they get that clonal rootstock that they want and then divide it up. Somebody goes and picks them up, and you can do things like that if you want those special clonal varieties from Brokaw. Or internet resources. Yep. You can email me on questions. I put my email up there. We have our Master Gardener website, which is our help desk, which is a great resource for all kinds of gardening questions. And so we have, you can also, there's lists of the varieties that do well here, there. There's a Southern California guy, Greg Alder. He has a really good website. You could read his blogs. Just know that they're hotter climate than us. So there might be varieties that do well for them that don't do well for us. So look at that variety chart as well. But he has watering charts and pictures, lots of pictures with diseases and different things that can happen to your avocado trees. So I get whenever he publishes something, I'm on his list to get a copy of his article. Good. And then we have a local guy, Bobcat Ridge, Ken Convisor. He's in Watsonville and he sells at the farmers markets, but he has a lot of avocados growing on his place. And so I always look to see what's ripening for him, what he's selling. And then I add a little time to mine because he's in a nice hot hillside thermal belt that gets a little less fog and more sun than I do on my kind of shady side of my mountain. But I still look and see what's ripening for him. I was like, oh, I have to try that variety. It's supposed to be good, that sort of thing. So I kind of watch his site.
Okay, and there's probably more in this appendix as well, but let's jump into, and here's some things about pests. Did you want to, is this in your appendix or did I skip?
Right. Yeah, this is appendix. So I moved all the pests and nutrient deficiency pictures because it takes a lot of time to go through it, but you can look at them and there's things you can do, different fertilizers, micronutrients. If you think your soil's kind of worn out, not a lot of micronutrients. That azomite has a lot of different things. And this nutrient ag at the very last item that says True 442. It's an organic, it's a chicken manure based pellet. And you can get a 40-pound sack of it there for, I think it's gone up to about $12. It comes from Canada, so I think it got a little bit higher. It used to be 10. Probably a tariff on it. I don't know. But anyway, So for 40 pounds of an organic fertilizer, that's a really good price if you have a lot of things to fertilize. And you can even
Right.
get it in bigger, you can get it in bigger bags than that if you want to buy a ton of it or something. But anyway,
Okay.
so
Great. Let's see what else. You've got your
here's
diseases in
pictures. Yeah,
here.
look at the
Mhm.
pictures of the root rot, because that it's very frequently happens if you leave the avocado too long in the pot, or it's not getting a lot of good drainage where it's planted, and you'll start getting root death, and it'll show up on the leaves and the branches as just this dark death that progressively starts out at the tips and goes along the branches. It turns black. And there's something you can try to save your tree on the next page. It helps with it root rot if you hasn't gone too far. You see that garden phos? It's phosphorus made by that Monterey company, and I've seen it help with trees in pots, and in ground. Folks have tried it, and I'm not sure how it works, but following the directions, it can help you kill some of the fungal thing that's going on, causing your tree to rot, and then eliminate the cause and begin with. Like maybe you have to replant that tree on a mound or quit watering so much, different things like that.
This is what the phosphorus is. Yeah. Yeah. All good things. Okay, let's see if we have some questions. And she has some descriptions here. Tiffany, you want to go ahead with any questions?
Yep, I'd love to. Thanks, Loretta. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in chat, the feedback form, just in case people start to drop off. This is a survey that you all can take to provide us feedback on how tonight's presentation went. But we're going to move on to the questions. So the first question we have is related to gopher baskets. And the question was, does the size of the gopher basket matter? Should it be the size of the pot, or should it be bigger than the pot that the tree was purchased in?
Typically, I would go with, well, it's size of the hole you want to dig, but typically if I have an avocado in what they call a 5-gallon pot, I use a 5-gallon basket, because, and get, you see different brands out there. The reason I like the local brand that's called Digger is because it's a thicker galvanized wire, so it lasts a little longer, and it's sized the right size to not allow a gopher to go through it. Some chicken wire, if you just use regular chicken wire, that the hexagon pattern on it, the holes might be too big, and even though you put this basket in, a little gopher can get through it. So that's why I stick with Digger. And the other important thing is, remember, you're not digging a deep hole, so you're going to have that top of that basket sticking up out of the soil when you plant your tree. But you got to watch it, because when you water, those gophers start circling that basket because they know there's something there and there's water there. So when you see it circling, crush down those tunnels or put in a gopher trap and get them then. Because if you leave it alone thinking your tree is protected, it's a mistake, because they circle enough, they know something's there. They will eventually come up and over. Not right away. They will make a mound on the side, because they're kind of judging how deep they have to mound the soil to get up and over. If that makes sense. If you've dealt with gophers, they're just the bane of my existence here in my real soft, sandy soil. But you can stop them from coming up and over if you trap them. And I hate to say it, but you got to kill them. I haven't seen repellents work. You see noise makers and castor oil based pellets and stuff to repel them. They will come and they will get your tree. So they'll get in there eventually. So keep smashing down that tunnel so they don't have a place to keep coming into to get close to your wire. And if you can, once you see that tunnel, dig it out and put a trap on either side and get them. But that's for gopher wire. It doesn't necessarily have to be bigger. They will go through it. The roots go through that size pretty well. And then eventually it does rot. It doesn't last forever. It rots out. When I've done it for citrus and avocado, and I have big trees that weren't hindered by it. The one type of basket that did hinder my trees that I noticed was when I bought this stainless steel mesh. It was real fine. and it says, oh, it doesn't rot. Well, that isn't kind of what you want. Maybe on something that doesn't have big roots like a tree, maybe on a perennial or a rose bush or something. But on fruit trees that want to get big root systems, I wouldn't use that fine mesh. It's easier to work with because the chicken wire ones, they're kind of rough on your hands and you kind of get scratched up a little bit and stuff, but they work better for the tree than that nice fine mesh that you just pull up like a sock over your root ball. It's easy to plant and it's soft, but it doesn't let roots out.
Thank you.
Okay, what
Super
other
helpful.
questions do we have? Yeah.
Yeah. So a question about where someone can get their baby seedling grafted. It sounds like the tree is about 1 year old, 4 feet tall, very healthy, and they live in Ventura County.
Wow, you're in a nice avocado citrus growing region. I'm jealous. Wow. So I would think if you get involved, if you can get online, social media, so I'm going to describe ones that I've seen in Facebook, but I imagine you could find the similar stuff in Reddit or other social media platforms. But like there's one for Northern California, and they're always talking about grafting. There's a lot of YouTube videos. It's not hard to do yourself if you want to try it. There's a lot of YouTube videos, but in those YouTube videos, you might find the people that are doing those videos, and there's a lot of experts out there that will help you graft your tree or come out and graft something for you. But you have to kind of do your research. I can't give you names automatically offhand, but these folks are experts. They've been doing, they learned on their own, and they've been grafting avocados for ages, and they're always posting videos to these different social media platforms. There's Northern California avocado growers. There's Southern California avocado growers. There's in general, and people come in from Australia and all these other foreign places, sites. But there's a lot of information out there, and you might be able to find a local person, especially if you look at your local master gardeners, or the other place that might have a local that can graft for you is the California Rare Fruit Growers, CRFG. There's a Central Coast one that's every year you can go and get scion wood for fruit trees and stone fruits, and it's free. It's a marvelous organization to join, and it's by area. There's a Monterey Bay, California Rare Fruit Growers. There's Santa Clara Valley, Central Coast, and you go to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo to get the budwood there. And a lot of times you'll find avocados there, and they're giving demos. And maybe those guys that are teaching and doing the demos will graft for you. So look up these organizations and find the ones that are local to you. And you're going to just learn a whole lot about growing and grafting and things like that. And then you'll be hooked. There isn't one. I feel like starting one called AA, Avaholics Anonymous. Because it's like, wow, you have one, and then they find this seedling that's just great, and it tastes really good, and it's huge or something, and it grows in the Bay in San Francisco, and you just want to graft it onto your tree. Many people have multi-grafts on their avocado tree, which you can do too. Once you get good at your grafting, you can have multiple varieties on one tree. Okay, next question.
All right. So now we're going to move some questions about specific trees and maybe potential problems people might be having. So the first question, Denise, I have a mature tree that hasn't produced fruit the past few years. It's tossed and has lovely fruit.
So is it young? What can happen with a young tree, and I had it happen with my lamb and my Hass too. They were really small, like maybe just 2 or 3 years in the ground, and they bloomed a lot, and they took. Maybe we had a nice dry spring, and I let them produce. I should have thinned. So it put so much energy into that crop that the next year none took. And my lamb house is on its second spring, and I didn't even see it bloom. So it got so depleted, I think, from me letting it mature and leave them long on the tree to see how long I could get them to ripen, and they were young. So fertilize so you can get your tree strong, and then hopefully, and Hats in general is notorious for alternate bearing. Good year, bad year, none the next, or very few. And then it should go back to good again. But when they're young, it doesn't necessarily go the alternate years. It might be a good crop and then 2 years before it goes back to a crop because it was so young when it had that big crop. Make sense?
Loretta, Denise is on there. Why don't you unmute Denise and answer the question about the age?
Oh, 20 plus years old?
It's very tall. It's like, I don't know, 25, 30 feet tall. I've only lived with the tree for about 8 years, but it used to produce lovely fruit, but it hasn't the last 3 years.
Are you fertilizing?
Intermittently, not anything consistent.
Okay, so it might be because of its size. Is it getting a good amount of sun, or has anything grown over the years to kind of shade it?
Yeah, we moved in a trailer
Uh-huh.
that's next to it. We also did cut some of its branches to do some construction.
Uh-huh.
And we put in
So-
more cement like around it. So it has like a good planter box around it, you know, maybe like 3 feet in diameter away from the trunk.
Uh-huh. So that cement might have hindered things. In some ways it can help, and in some ways it can hurt, because you know the original root span of that tree went as far out as the tree canopy did. So when things got cut back, the roots were still out there. So you cut back on the branches and then it got cemented over. So it might have really hurt water absorption down there. Maybe try special soakings to try to get it more water. That it could be suffering from that. And where I've seen cement help an avocado tree is sometimes, depending on the way the water flows, it can actually hold water in, and it can make warmth because it radiates warmth when it gets warm if it's in a place where it gets sun. But it sounds like in your case you had a combination of cutting it back, and then it might have lost some root because of where the concrete went. And 3 feet out from a trunk isn't a lot of room when the roots go a lot further out than that. It was a big mature tree. So it might have to take a while to recover. So water it and feed it, and just keep nursing it if you want to keep trying to get it back to bearing. But that's probably what kind of got a shock. And they're vigorous growers if they get the food and water they need. So I'm not sure how much that concrete is inhibiting that.
Thank you
Does that
so
help?
much.
Okay.
We have another question from Terry. My mature Mexicola has only produced a few fruit in the last 3 years. Right now, there are tons of flowers, but many seem to be falling off. Is that normal?
Yes, I think the statistics for how many blossoms get pollinated, they shoot out thousands and thousands of blooms, and it's like 0.001, like 1,000% or something that get pollinated. So they are going to have a lot of blooms for sure. And then if you just keep watching, look for pollinators out there on those blooms when they're open. Look for little flies and ants and bees and other native bees and native flies to see if you see any activity on the blooms. And you know for sure it was a Mexicola, right?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, about how old is it?
Oh, it's like 15 years.
Okay, so you did have only a few fruits.
It used to have about 25 pounds or more.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think I should, from what I heard, I think I should fertilize it, and probably I should. Well, I always thought because we get lots of rain here that I didn't need to give it too much water, but I think maybe I haven't been giving it enough.
Yes, because I have all these seedling trees I was talking about, these huge 30-footers, like 2 dozen, and they seem to be growing just fine. A few of them look a little chlorotic, the leaves are veiny, because I never have given supplemental water or feed. And I say, well, only 6 bear, but that could also be because I don't water them. they water themselves. It's a very interesting thing. On our foggy summer mornings, it sounds like it's raining out in the avocado orchard, because the leaves are pretty big and they collect the moisture from the fog and it drips on itself. But that still isn't enough. And the tree can look decent and not bare because it isn't getting enough water. And I was guilty of that with my first set of avocados. I said, well, it's looking good, it's growing, why isn't it bearing? And when I started increasing the summer water, I got more pollination.
Okay,
So
I'll give that a try.
more water and fertilize. Give it some fertilizer, because I didn't realize how depleted my land was, because years ago they grew a lot of berries out here, and so it does get minerally deficient and depleted. So even though you might be having green growth, you don't have micronutrient in there.
Yeah, it's very vigorous. Is it too late to fertilize it this year?
Oh no, you can fertilize now. It's perfect time now, because actually, fertilizers work better when the soil starts warming up, especially the organic ones, because they take a little longer to break down. And again, you need all those active microorganisms in the soil to start helping your tree feed itself.
Okay,
right?
Thank you.
You need those. You need the soil to be warm. So fertilize now, and maybe just light fertilizations every 2 or 3 months, with the last one being in the fall. Some folks say, oh, don't fertilize in the fall, because it encourages them to put on a lot of winter growth that may be tender and get frost bit. But from the experts I know in our area, they say it's that's true, but you do get a healthier tree coming out of that spring. While the soil's warm, keep fertilizing. When it's cold and rainy, it doesn't do you any good. You're putting it out there and it isn't really breaking down and doing much of anything.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a question from Aaron. I have mature trees with substantial trunk holes, possibly caused by damage in the past, topping or cold. Have you seen this before, and should anything be done?
Well, it sounds like it's a hole. This is a hole that looks like when they cut it. See, so sometimes we prune, and this can happen with all types of trees. If you cut that limb too close to the trunk, even if you think you're just cutting it flush with the trunk, that's too deep, because the surrounding tissue will encroach and move in and seal up that hole. But if you cut it too deep, it can't seal up that hole, and you get knot holes. That's how you get knot holes in trees, is because either a branch broke off and it went past there's a collar on a branch. There's a collar space where the branch grows out of the trunk. And if you cut too close to that collar, you're cutting that into that tissue that will come and enclose the wound that you prune, even if it's a big wound. And so if you're seeing holes, it's probably due to big branches cut too close to the trunk. And the opposite happens when you cut too far away. It comes in to try to heal, but you'll always see a stub sticking out, and maybe that stub dies and then it rots and you still have a hole. So I don't know that you can fill it or do anything with it now, but watch out for any rot that might be forming in that hole. And if there's anything you can do about it. With trunks, it's hard, but if you do get rot in a trunk, I know you have this property, you told me about it, that has all these, that has an orchard on it. But if it was kind of malpruned a long time ago, maybe it has to be cut below that big hole. Only if you see a problem arising because it's rotting there. But avocados can be stumped and top worked. So that might be a good experiment if that hole looks like it's a detriment to the tree. And if it's not so low that you can't cut below that hole at a slight angle to drain water off, and see if you can stimulate that avocado into shooting new growth, and then top work it with a known variety of avocado. That's what I want to do with mine. I've seen a few holes in mine, I think, where it was a natural break, and it broke and it kind of it cut too close to that limb, that collar I'm talking about, that branch collar, and it didn't heal. It healed with a hole still there. But I haven't seen any bad rot in any of mine yet because of that deep hole. So just watch it. Well, it could do just fine. And you're seeing, oh, can anything be done topping or, yeah. So just keep an eye out to see if it's a danger, and maybe over time it'll continue to push tissue over that hole, but I'm not sure how long a tree will try to heal. It might get to the point it's all kind of, it's working on other things instead of trying to close up that old hole.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much, Loretta. Are there any other questions just before we look to close? We're kind of up to our total time. Sorry.
There was,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Trink, there was one additional question that came into the Q&A earlier from Marianne, related to whether a dwarf avocado would work in a potted tree. This was as a potted tree. This was before Loretta kind of covered that section, but I just wanted to make sure Marianne got any questions covered. If any, I guess, Marianne, if you have any further questions, type them into chat or feel free to go off mute. Loretta can answer them. I think that's all.
Okay, so the whole concept of dwarf avocado is there's kind of, it's not, there are small trees that just grow that way naturally. It isn't like an orange tree where there's semi-dwarf and dwarf, or even an apple tree or a stone fruit that are dwarfed because of the root stock that it's grafted to causes that tree to grow smaller. In avocados, there isn't a root stock that's dwarfing. And it bothers me. I see a lot of labels out there in nurseries and in big box stores, dwarf avocado. And it's typically a variety called Wurtz, W-U-R-T-Z. Also, you'll see it called little cado. And it's one of those that naturally grows smaller. Supposedly in our climate, that Wurtz, and I'm believing the Epicenter avocado guys, because they say it doesn't really taste that great here. It might taste better grown in Southern California. And that's something I've noted with all the varieties I grow, is that they taste better when they're grown in a hotter summer. We can still get great ones, good ones, but in Southern Cal, they're exceptional. And here they're just good. Makes sense? So anyway, getting back to the dwarf though, you can keep smaller varieties like Gem is a tasty one. Holiday is smaller, that tastes better than little cado. But if you already have a little cado, yes, you can. If you can get a bigger pot, because even though it's a small tree, it'll still get good size. It can get 8 to 10 feet and it'll want a bigger root zone. So the bigger pot, if you can get a big 30 to 40 gallon trash can and drill holes in it, or you can buy, I've seen avocados for sale at the commercial vendors and they put them in the big 2 foot by 2 foot wooden crate. It's kind of shaped a bit pyramidal and they're loaded with fruit. That's a big box. So you can grow them in pots, start with the smaller trees, and adjust your pot size accordingly because they're going to still want to grow. And then once it's kind of big enough for you to handle and you don't want any bigger, keep pruning it. Prune the tree on the outside to keep it contained. And periodically you still need to repot it because soil wears out. But you're going to need more food and water in that pot. But there's other varieties of fruit bearing trees that do better in pots than avocado. And it's mostly because of the nature of the size they get and confinement issues, I'm going to say. Like I say, they sell big ones and you can buy them for a few $100 in a big 24-inch by 24-inch cedar crate. My brother had some good fruit bearing on it. He used what I just described. He bought those 35-gallon trash cans and he tried to get them wider than tall if he could find them and drilled them. And they had that natural ring at the bottom to where they could still drain. And he got good growth and he took very good care of them in the pots with the watering and the fertilizing. And he got good amounts of fruit, I'd say. Still not what you're going to get in the ground, of course, but good amounts. Yeah.
That's great. That's really great. So everyone, do be sure to look back in our chat to the evaluation that Tiffany put in there. And we would greatly appreciate your feedback, including any recommendations on classes that you would like to see in the future. any subjects that we haven't been covering. So we're always creating new classes, and just want to know what you want to hear. And we so appreciate you coming here tonight with us. And do look at, let me go back again, actually a couple slides. Forgive me here if I can. I just want to remind you of, here are some upcoming classes that we have that you'll find on our website. And we do have our annual spring plant sale starting next week. It's all an online plant sale. So you go on to the website, you look at the things that are listed there and some pictures of some of the plants. You order them, purchase them, and then a date will be set up for you to come pick them up at a couple of different locations, because we are in both sides of the bay. One location is in Salinas, and then another location is over here in Watsonville. So do look for that. And we hope you have a wonderful spring and get out there and start planting things. It's a great time of year. Loretta, thank you very much. Your classes are always excellent. This and the citrus class a couple months ago was really great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening. And you contact Master Gardener's hotline if you have any other questions. Okay. Thank you all.
Good night. Who's doing that regenerative one? That sounds fascinating. Regenerative.
I think that's a oh shoot, I've forgotten her name. She's I can't think of